It has been prophesized that our consumption of video games will, in the perhaps not so distant future, go the way of film and television. That is, the convenience and ease of streaming. And it makes a lot of sense, with games becoming increasingly massive in scope, taking up ludicrous amounts of our precious console hard drive space. There's only so many patches and content updates we can bear to install. The day of the disc being the only gateway to our favourite experiences are long gone. And in that way, it does feel like we're in some sort of transitionary phase, as engineers and others much smarter than me work to solve these issues. The thought of being able to access games we've purchased by just opening up the application, forgetting install times and storage limitations, it's the dream, and it may not be that far away. Obviously, we're not there yet, but Microsoft is making terrific moves in the area heading towards the launch of the Series X later this year. Their xCloud service being bundled into Game Pass in September means the concept of streaming is going to be introduced to millions who can try it with a large catalogue of games from the get-go. Offering streaming as an alternative to people who also own your console is a sound starting point. But as much as I love talking about the potential future of the industry and Xbox's successes, today I actually want to discuss these topics through the lens of another platform which entered the streaming game last year. Now you may have had to rack your brain to think of what the hell I was talking about if it wasn't in the title already, because boy, Google Stadia seemed to fall off the face of the earth. I remember last year we were watching with interest as to what Google's first foray into the gaming space would look like. There was never a ton of hype or expectations that Google was going to start dominating with Stadia, but I personally believe Stadia would offer something that at the very least attracted a large enough audience for Microsoft and Sony to pay attention. Their first presentation at GDC 2019 seemed appealing enough, even while being light on concrete information at the time. But fast forward to the present and so many gamers couldn't give two shits about Stadia, myself included. The entire premise of this video genuinely came about from me being reminded that it was still a thing a couple of weeks ago, which isn't great when you're as connected to current events in gaming as I am. So for my own interest and hopefully yours as well, I want to take a look at what Google has been up to with Stadia since their mediocre launch and determine if anything of value currently exists with the platform. To get you up to speed, let's talk about Google's pricing model with Stadia. First off, it's totally free to sign up. Doing so will get you access to the store, where you can purchase games for regular retail prices. Essentially, it just acts as your standard app store. But you also have Stadia Pro as an option, which is their subscription service. For $10 per month, you get free access to a selected library of games. Think Xbox Game Pass. Exclusive discounts, and the ability to play in 4K HDR. Which sounds totally feasible for anyone living in Australia like me. Anyway, taking a look at the library of games for purchase, you can spot such AAA bangers as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Doom Eternal. So there's plenty of cool games available, but they are nonetheless games that we have already played elsewhere for years. Meaning hardcore players, which should naturally be the target for the launch of a brand new console brand, have no reason to care really. And while the likes of Ubisoft and Take-Two seem to be committed to supporting Stadia with their releases for now, as we've seen with Assassin's Creed Valhalla this year, there's no telling how long that will last. These third-party publishers have zero issue with dropping support when it just isn't worth it for them anymore, as we saw in the years following Wii U's 2012 launch. And the Stadia Pro lineup is even more disappointing. You've got Destiny 2's paid expansions, and PUBG, I guess? There's some well-regarded smaller games, but the offering is certainly abysmal compared to the similarly priced Xbox Game Pass, which is absolutely stacked. Google did establish their own promising first-party studio with the purpose of developing exclusive AAA games for their platform, but that team's project is likely still years away, with there currently being no hint as to what it would be. So why should we care when the service by its very nature is unreliable and there's nothing interesting to play that makes pushing through its connection issues worth it? Looking at Stadia's recent activities, there isn't much to report unfortunately. Google recently added 4K HDR support on Android TV, and they've started supporting other Android devices as well. And that's really all I could find feature-wise, honestly. It's a shame to see it so half-baked. Stadia is still missing what you would think to be the most straightforward features for any console or game service. Party chat and viewing achievements, for example, are only available through the web right now, and while I think of it, honestly, Nintendo has to get on those as well. Unfortunately, it's impossible for us to know for certain just how many people actively play Stadia on a monthly or weekly basis. Anecdotally, I've seen so little about it that I would assume the numbers are low. But let's try and get a sense as to what's actually going on. First off, the free Stadia app only passed 1 million downloads a few months ago earlier this year. Only people that played exclusively on their computer and don't want to even look at their profile or anything on their mobile wouldn't download it. But also, the app is free, meaning people that don't play Stadia would likely have it downloaded as well. So let's say the app has a little over 1 million downloads right now. A ton of those people likely aren't even Stadia customers. But then at the same time, like I said, there probably are a few Stadia customers who don't have the app. So obviously this is very vague speculation, but I would say that maybe 800,000, 900,000 people have tried Stadia, have played Stadia. Obviously you can kind of determine any estimate you want from what I just said, but that's kind of the number I think I'll go with here. And those certainly aren't active players either, those are just the amount of people that have tried it at all. Which naturally, compared to Xbox and PlayStation consoles whenever they come around, selling 1 million units each in their first 24 hours. Only having these numbers after 9 months or so on the market isn't a statistic for anyone at Google to be proud of. I had a cheeky dabble into the Stadia subreddit, and while it probably isn't great that one of the first posts I run into is discussing how Doom 2016 on Stadia has literally 5 people playing the multiplayer mode, I was personally more surprised to find an active community of people who seem to be genuinely passionate about Stadia, which is cool to me. Clearly there is an interest for Stadia present amongst my fellow human beings somewhere. Another positive sign in terms of consumer interest are the people seeing the most recent Stadia Connect. I had no idea that these had been happening at all post-launch for Stadia, and I'd consider myself to be fairly aware of events and news in the games industry like I mentioned. So I was really surprised to find out that on the YouTube highlight video for the July edition of Stadia Connect, there are over 2.6 million views. I did a little bit more digging, and by that I mean clicking on the video, and found that the like-to-dislike ratio and amount of comments was way off. Obviously, there's no way that a video that has this many views only has this many likes and dislikes. So I don't know, what I thought was originally actual engagement in Stadia seems to be some weird voodoo bullshit that Google's pulling to get maximum views. I'm not an expert, I don't know how they're doing that, and it's definitely not a great sign if they're going out of their way to try and disguise just how little people care about their platform. There's a lot to consider with the future of game streaming. We can talk about its restrictions with international internet speeds just not being able to support the concept, at least not right now. We can praise its convenience and portability, and in this video I completely neglected Sony's own alternative PS Now, because I wanted to focus on Stadia up until this point and in the future. So long term, I can't see Google Stadia becoming a major contender amongst the other 3 console manufacturers. Google Plus, Google Play Music and YouTube Gaming are only a very small selection of the products which at one point the company had high hopes for and put significant resources into establishing, all of which no longer have any relevance. Just check out killedbygoogle.com, which is definitely a real thing, I'm not kidding, for the never-ending list. And it really is not hard to imagine Stadia joining that list at some point. It's also highly possible it continues to slowly grow its hardcore fan base and improve as a service simultaneously. But who knows? Google is a tool we all use, and as a result, Stadia can potentially be put in front of a larger audience than Sony and Microsoft could ever hope for. Stadia's original pitch of having people be able to search for games or stumble upon them while searching and then immediately start streaming is still the strongest example we've ever seen of AAA games being insanely accessible to any audience. And of course the general influence of the company can't be understated. I guess what remains to be seen is if Google will lose interest in gaming, as they have with so many other initiatives.